Now, as we discussed earlier this week, Disney has no plans or intentions on backing off on the whole DEI agenda in their upcoming Disney live-action remakes of the original animated movies, and let alone everything up and coming for Marvel, Star Wars, and just Disney in general. Bob Iger and the board, regardless of the DEI situation happening with Disney right now, they are doubling down on all of that, and it's not going to end in any, of course, near sight for Disney as we speak. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. And let's get right into exactly what's going on here with Snow White 2024. Now, as of now, it stands as holding the same exact release date window for March of 2024. It's very likely to get delayed if things get worse for Disney, like how they are discussing on delaying the Marvels. That could very well happen, but focusing here on what's going on with this movie in particular, and how it has now put Disney into a very problematic situation that just got a little bit more tricky than how their current, situation was just last week. So we know that Snow White is going through a re-edit phase, and that's pretty much on the horizon. Within the next couple of weeks, they're going to actually anticipate that and get that rolling. But what's even all the more intriguing is how one of the test screenings actually turned out to be a disaster for Snow White 2024, and how it revolves around actress Gal Gadot as the evil queen within the third act of the film. Let's get into it. Now, with the Snow White situation getting very much more complicated every week for Disney, recently one significant development spells a recipe for disaster from one of the most recent test screenings that took place per Disney. Now, the test screening for Snow White reportedly got very negative feedback for the ending of the film, which features Gal Gadot as the evil queen when she meets her demise, as it completely goes against the 1937 original and holds devalued dialogue, with what's described as Gal's worst acting ever in her career, period, that Disney and director Mark Webb chose to put into the final cut so far. Now, the test screening ended up so poor for the third act specifically that Disney is now considering using one of the other two endings that were shot back in June of 2022. A select amount of audience members were chosen to take part in the screening, and Gal's performance was described to be a scene in which, when she dies, she does, of course, die and falls into the edge of a specific graveyard. Now, I don't know if you guys knew this. We talked about this around 2 weeks ago, that her demise is going to be very much different than what we saw in the 1937 original. They're not doing the traditional death where she falls off the edge of the cliff with a lightning strike scene in the background and how a rock falls on top of her. Disney chose a different path, and though they did film an ending that honors the 37 original, they did not use it in the final cut. That's why Gal has been very much frustrated with Disney for choosing the ending that holds her worst acting ever, not just in Snow White, but also in her whole acting career. That's why there's been a lot of drama between Gal and Disney and why she walked away from the Snow White prequel movie. We've talked about that earlier this week as well. Moving onwards, this is where things get complicated. However, the scene reportedly used very cheap practical effects and makeup combined with Gal's subpar acting that was actually labeled as the worst part of the film. Her demise specifically is Snow White uses a weapon that's crafted by the magical creatures, aka the Seven Dwarfs, that holds a special gem at the very end of the staff that turns her into a mummy-like figure corpse that falls into a graveyard. Director Mark Webb and Disney higher-ups are now scrambling to make a decision on if they want to change the ending or leave things as is. The Queen reportedly meets her demise by a staff-esque weapon that's created by the Seven Dwarfs inside of a cave, and how she meets her demise by turning into that mummy-esque creature. Disney felt it was the safer route than pulling, of course, a stunt where a rock falls on top of her after falling off a cliff. Now, let me just say one thing about that quick, guys, before I get to the next piece, is that, does that not make any sense to you? They felt a less violent death for the evil queen would be making her turn into a mummy-like figure, the life force getting sucked out of her by use of this staff-like weapon, and having her fall into a graveyard, versus her just falling off the edge of a cliff with a boulder falling off and actually toppling on top of Gal Gadot's evil queen. Not necessarily showing it on camera even. That's not really all that violent, but I think that this one in particular is a little bit more gruesome on camera, speaking of course. So it just doesn't make any sense. We also talked about how there was one variant of the apple scene that was shot that the test screening did very negative on, where basically she does not take the bite out of the apple. Snow White does not do that. She only touches the apple and gets weakened. So does that sound like she's not going to fall into a deep sleep in this film? It's very possible. We'll be learning more about that as we go throughout this week, and we'll keep you guys updated. But this is the more concern for Snow White, is the fact that they really are trying to figure out, how do we really figure out on the ending of this particular film, and how do we stabilize the current situation of Snow White 2024, right? We all know that there's a lot of things going on right now between Bob Iger and the board, and how they really want to stabilize the Snow White film, both marketing-wise, and not just that, but also how they want to re-edit this film entirely. Alright, we'll talk about that later as well. Continuing on. Now, the sequence reportedly is a mixture of themes, get this, from Lord of the Rings and Snow White and the Huntsman. So they were aiming for Snow White and the Huntsman themes there. An ending of the original Death of the Evil Queen was shot, and Disney surprisingly remains undecided if they want to choose that one or the other ending, in which it's incomplete and would need additional filming. However, the current strikes are getting in the way of all of that right now. Now, the screening has now put the film in a complex position further. Let me just say one thing. Do you guys think that this is going to delay the release date? Because I think it's very possible, if they keep moving ahead with all of these changes, these rearrangements of the film, and really kind of trying to just do something different with this movie. I think that they're going to run themselves into a lot of trouble. Granted, we already know that there are conversations happening at Disney right now about delaying the Marvels from November of this year till early 2024, which is going to create a domino effect for all Disney movies. So that would definitely impact, of course, Snow White's release date. There's no doubt about that. So it's interesting to see where things are leading for Gal's performance. And honestly, if Gal's performance really is that bad, it could very well become a, common joke or a common meme, kind of like the whole Kal-El no thing from the Justice League, right? So, yeah, I would like to hear what you guys have to say about this, because this movie could very, very well an ironic one. We talked about this. Everything could very well have started with Snow White for Disney and end with Snow White for Disney in 2024. So guys, drop a comment below, fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.
Gun in hand, we are alone again. From night to moon, we hear them moans again.